The moment your wife answers a simple question too fast, your marriage starts sounding like a rehearsed script. Claire lifted her wine glass before I finished speaking. Confess to what? Smooth tone. Tiny smile. Fast response. Too fast. I watched her eyes instead of her mouth. People lie with words. Eyes calculate. Eyes scan for danger. 1 year of marriage sat between us like expensive stage design. The candles. The anniversary dinner reservation. The polished silverware. The framed wedding photo near the kitchen counter. All of it looked solid. Structured. Stable. The kind of life people screenshot on Instagram and call goals. I used to believe that image too. Then I started tracking timestamps. You're staring at me, Claire said softly. I leaned back in my chair and rotated my whiskey glass once. I've been doing that a lot lately. She laughed lightly, but her shoulders tightened. Small movement. Most husbands miss movements like that because they listen emotionally. I started listening financially. Technically. Logically. 3 months earlier, I caught the first inconsistency during a routine review of our joint expenses. I manage infrastructure contracts for a commercial engineering firm in downtown Chicago. Numbers feed my life. Timelines matter. Every invoice leaves fingerprints. Claire forgot that. She used the same Visa card for a $312 boutique hotel charge in River North on a Thursday afternoon, while supposedly attending a corporate training seminar in Milwaukee. The mileage gap bothered me first. Then the timestamp. Then the valet fee. I almost confronted her that night. Instead, I opened Excel. That spreadsheet became the autopsy report of my marriage. Dates. Receipts. Uber logs. Restaurant charges. Calendar overlaps. By week 2, patterns emerged. Claire vanished every second Thursday between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. Same part of the city. Same parking structure. Same deleted calls appearing on our phone statement backups. She covered her tracks emotionally. She ignored the digital residue. I hired a forensic accountant before I hired a lawyer. Best decision I ever made. People imagine betrayal as lipstick stains and dramatic confessions. Real. Betrayal hides inside metadata. Subscription renewals. Cloud backups. Shared passwords people forget they shared. I kept my voice calm during dinner because rage destroys leverage. Evidence builds leverage. Claire reached for her wine again. Her wedding ring clicked softly against the glass stem. Ethan, seriously, she smiled. You're acting strange tonight. Strange. Interesting word. Women use strange when a husband stops behaving predictably. I used to apologize during arguments. Used to chase emotional closure. Used to explain myself. 3 weeks ago, I sat across from attorney Michael Reeves on the 32nd floor of a Michigan Avenue law office while he reviewed printed transaction records from our joint accounts. He circled one payment with a black pen. Your wife withdrew $12,000 over 4 months, he said. Cash increments under reporting thresholds. That usually means concealment planning. Planning. That word changed everything. Affairs destroy trust. Planning destroys mercy. Claire took a bite of salmon and reached for my hand across the table. Same gesture she used in our wedding photos. Same soft expression. Same practiced warmth. Talk to me, she whispered. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Then my phone vibrated beside my plate. One notification. One image preview. Unknown sender. I lowered my eyes to the screen and felt something cold settle into my chest. Claire in the lobby of the Blackstone Hotel. Timestamped 3 days ago. Her hand pressed against Daniel Brooks' chest. And beneath the image, only 6 words appeared. She still hasn't told you, has she? I kept my face steady after the message hit my screen, but inside my head, every loose thread suddenly pulled tight. Claire reached for her wine again. Fingers graceful, controlled, elegant in the same rehearsed way she handled every uncomfortable conversation during the last 6 months. I turned my phone over slowly and slid it beside my plate. Everything okay? She asked. There it was again. Calm voice. Fast question. People hiding secrets always monitor reactions before facts. I nodded once and cut into my steak like a man discussing quarterly taxes instead of watching his marriage bleed out in real time. The strange part about betrayal is how quickly your brain stops reacting emotionally and starts processing strategically. 3 months earlier, I still wanted explanations. 2 months earlier, I wanted proof. By tonight, I wanted leverage. Claire started telling a story about her marketing director landing a luxury retail account in Seattle. I already knew the Seattle trip never happened. Michael Reeves verified that last week through corporate reimbursement records. Claire submitted airfare receipts tied to a flight number that Delta canceled 12 days before departure. Sloppy detail. Affairs collapse under logistics long before emotions crack open. I spent 72 hours building a timeline around that fake trip alone. Parking garage scans. American Express charges. Cell tower pings from her phone backup. Daniel Brooks appeared beside every gap like a watermark beneath cheap paper. You barely touched your drink, Claire said. Big day tomorrow? Something like that. I studied her carefully while she smiled at me across the table. A year ago, that smile convinced me to propose beside Lake Michigan after a Cubs game and overpriced champagne at a rooftop restaurant. Back then, Claire felt ambitious, polished, magnetic. She walked into rooms like she belonged in them. I admired that confidence. Then I married it. Marriage changes visibility. Dating shows personality. Marriage reveals patterns. Claire stopped asking about my day around month 7. She started guarding her phone around month 8. By month 9, she began withdrawing cash every Friday afternoon in amounts small enough to avoid attention, but consistent enough to create structure. $500, $700, $900. I flagged the withdrawals inside a private spreadsheet labeled consulting budget, so she would overlook it if she searched my desktop. Michael called it asset staging. Daniel probably called it freedom money. My lawyer called it useful. Claire brushed hair behind her ear and glanced toward my phone again. Tiny movement. Quick curiosity. You still seem distracted, she said softly. Work? Partially. Ethan. Her tone shifted lower. Concerned wife mode. She used that voice during our engagement whenever I worked late downtown. Hearing it now felt like listening to a cover song played slightly off-key. Talk to me. I almost laughed. Instead, I stood, carried both plates into the kitchen, and opened the drawer beside the refrigerator. Inside sat a thick manila folder beneath a stack of utility bills. Bank statements. Hotel invoices. Printed screenshots. Financial summaries. Draft separation agreements. Claire watched me carefully now. Every instinct in her body sensed movement under the surface. Good. Pressure exposes character faster than accusations. I returned to the table carrying only a single sheet of paper. Her eyes tracked it immediately. What is that? She asked. I placed the page beside her wine glass and sat back down slowly. The color drained from her face before she even touched it. Blackstone Hotel. Room 1814. 2 electronic key entries. One registered under Daniel Brooks. The second registered under Claire Walker. Claire stared at the paper for 3 full seconds before touching it. Most people think guilt looks dramatic. It rarely does. Guilt looks mathematical. Eyes calculating angles. Brain measuring escape routes. Fingers buying time. She lifted the hotel invoice carefully, scanning line by line while keeping her breathing controlled. Impressive composure. A year ago, that same composure attracted me. Tonight, it confirmed everything. You went through my accounts? She asked quietly. Interesting choice again. She skipped denial and moved straight toward process violation. Lawyers do that. Guilty people too. I folded my hands together and studied her face. You used our joint credit line, I said. That made it my account too. Claire set the paper down slowly. This looks bad. It looks accurate. Her jaw tightened. Tiny shift. Tiny crack. I spent months learning the architecture of her reactions. Pressure entered her shoulders first. Anger touched her mouth second. Fear arrived through silence. She reached fear now. Ethan, Daniel works with me. I know. We had meetings downtown. I know. The hotel booked conference. Suites. Room 1814 was never registered as a conference suite. That stopped her cold. The dangerous thing about evidence is how quickly it removes oxygen from a lie. Claire leaned back and crossed her arms tightly across her chest. Defensive posture. Closed posture. I used to soften when she looked overwhelmed. Tonight, I watched clinically. How long have you been doing this? She asked. There it was. Shift in power. She stopped defending the affair and started investigating my awareness. That question mattered more to her than the exposure itself. I glanced toward the manila folder still resting inside the kitchen drawer. Long enough. Claire pressed her lips together hard. You hired somebody. Several people. Her eyes sharpened instantly. Smart woman. She understood the implications immediately. Lawyers. Financial tracing. Digital recovery. Asset review. She realized this dinner stopped being emotional the moment I stayed calm. You tracked me? She asked. I audited inconsistencies. That sounds insane. So does 6 months of hidden hotel charges. The silence stretched tighter now. I could almost hear her reorganizing her strategy in real time. Emotional appeal failed. Denial collapsed. Now she needed minimization. Nothing serious happened, she said carefully. Daniel and I got close during the Seattle account expansion. I smiled faintly at that. The fake Seattle account expansion? Her eyes flicked upward instantly. Another involuntary tell. Michael Reeves warned me about that reaction during preparation meetings. When people lose narrative control, he said, their eyes search vertically before they rebuild a version of events. Claire rebuilt quickly. You have pieces of context. That is all. I have your deleted cloud backups too. That hit harder than the invoice. Her face lost color immediately. 3 weeks earlier, a digital forensic contractor named Neil Harper recovered 37 deleted images and partial message fragments from Claire's sync tablet backup. Most people erase phones. Very few people erase secondary cloud caches correctly. Technology punishes arrogance. Claire looked toward the hallway suddenly, then toward my office door, calculating access points, calculating damage. What exactly did you recover? She asked slowly. I almost answered. Instead, I stood and walked toward the kitchen counter where our framed wedding photo sat beside the espresso machine. Claire in white silk, me in a black tuxedo. 2 people smiling like trust came naturally. I picked up the frame carefully and turned it toward her. Do you remember what you said during your vows? I asked. Claire swallowed hard, but said nothing. You said loyalty mattered more to you than passion because passion fades under pressure. Her eyes watered slightly now. Real emotion finally surfaced. Too late. I set the frame back down and pulled a second document from the folder behind me. This one carried the letterhead from Reeves and Porter Family Law Associates. Claire saw the firm logo and immediately stood from her chair. You already filed. Claire gripped the edge of the dining table so tightly her knuckles turned pale against the candlelight. You filed for divorce before talking to me? She asked. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. Genuine emotion finally surfaced beneath the polished corporate mask she wore so well. I stayed seated and watched carefully because moments like this reveal who somebody truly values. The marriage, the reputation, the money, the control. I talked to you for months, I said quietly. You just answered somebody else instead. Claire shook her head quickly. Ethan, this went too far because you kept digging instead of asking me directly. Another shift. Another attempt to move accountability away from the affair and toward my investigation. Michael warned me about that too. Betrayal follows patterns. First denial, then minimization, then moral reversal. Suddenly, the person uncovering the truth becomes the villain disturbing the peace. Claire paced toward the kitchen island, arms folded tightly now. You hired lawyers, accountants, investigators. Who does that after one mistake? I looked at her steadily. People protecting themselves from someone planning an exit strategy. Her eyes flashed instantly. There. Direct hit. I stood and walked toward my office near the back hallway. Claire followed 2 steps behind me. Faster breathing now. Faster movements. The illusion of control kept slipping through her hands, and she felt every second of it. Inside the office, I unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk and removed a thick black binder. Tabs divided everything by category. Financial transfers, timeline reconstruction, digital recovery, asset exposure, potential concealment. Claire stared at the binder like it contained a second version of her life. In many ways, it did. You built a case against me, she whispered. I built protection around myself. I opened the binder carefully and turned several pages toward her. Screenshots, withdrawal logs, transaction clusters, copies of temporary storage unit payments under Daniel Brooks' name. Claire froze when she saw the storage unit records. You searched him too? She asked. Daniel entered my marriage 6 months ago. That made him relevant. Her breathing shifted again. Sharp inhale. Slow release. She looked down at the page showing 3 separate deposits transferred from Claire's personal savings account into a secondary account Daniel opened 4 months earlier. Same branch. Same banker. Structured increments below internal review thresholds. Michael nearly smiled when he found those transfers. Hidden affairs create emotional damage. Hidden financial coordination creates legal exposure. It was temporary, Claire said quickly. Daniel had business problems. Daniel earns $240,000 a year plus bonuses. Her mouth closed instantly. I turned another page. Then another. Restaurant receipts. Hotel access records. 2 recovered message fragments from her cloud backup. 1 line sat highlighted in yellow marker. Once the condo sells, we can finally breathe. Claire grabbed the binder suddenly and slammed it shut. Enough. That word echoed through the office harder than shouting would have. I stayed calm because calm unsettles guilty people more than anger ever could. You planned a future with him, I said evenly. You used our marriage to finance the transition. Claire stared at me with wet eyes now. You think this was some calculated operation? I think you opened a hidden account 11 weeks after our honeymoon. Silence hit hard after that. The kind that strips away performance entirely. Claire sat slowly in the leather chair across from my desk and pressed both hands against her forehead. Exhaustion finally replaced strategy. You have no idea what happened between us, she whispered. I leaned forward slightly. Then explained the life insurance update. Her head snapped upward instantly. Fear moved across her face so fast, it almost looked painful. Good. Because until that exact moment, Claire still believed I had only uncovered the affair. She still had no idea I found the policy change she filed 3 weeks earlier naming Daniel Brooks as partial beneficiary. Claire stood so fast the leather chair rolled backward into the bookshelf behind her. That policy means nothing, she snapped. First real anger of the night. Raw. Immediate. Emotional pressure finally burned through the polished executive composure she wore like armor. I stayed seated at my desk and watched carefully because anger usually arrives right before panic. Partial beneficiary status means something to the insurance company, I said evenly, especially after a $150,000 increase. Claire rubbed both hands against her face and turned away from me. Her breathing came faster now. Every controlled sentence she practiced internally during the affair kept collapsing under documented facts. That happens when lies survive emotionally but fail structurally. Daniel helped me review investment options, she muttered. Weak answer. Weak tone. She knew it too. I opened the binder again and slid another page toward her across the desk. Insurance modification date. Digital signature confirmation. Beneficiary allocation percentages. Daniel Brooks listed at 30%. Claire stared at the page silently. You updated this 3 weeks after opening the hidden savings account. I continued. Same month you transferred funds into Daniel's secondary checking account. Same month both of you toured condos in River North. Her eyes widened instantly. There it was again. Surprise layered beneath fear. She still underestimated how deep the investigation went. Michael pushed hard for full financial tracing once the hidden account surfaced. At first I resisted because part of me still wanted this nightmare to shrink into something explainable. Then Neil Harper recovered deleted location metadata from Claire's tablet backups. One address repeated 5 times across 6 weeks. Lakeshore Tower Residences. Unit tours scheduled under Daniel's corporate email. Suddenly the affair stopped looking emotional and started looking operational. You followed us. Claire whispered. I followed transactions. This sounds insane. Affairs sound romantic until spreadsheets enter the room. Claire turned toward the office window and wrapped her arms around herself tightly. Smaller now. Less confident. The version of her standing in front of me barely resembled the woman who commanded conference rooms downtown. Secrets drain authority fast once exposure begins. You think I plan to leave you? She asked quietly. I leaned back slowly. I think you created financial separation before emotional separation. Silence again. Heavy this time. Claire lowered herself into the chair across from me and stared down at the carpet for several seconds before speaking. Daniel pushed for things to move faster, she admitted softly. That sentence landed harder than the hotel records ever could. Because suddenly the affair gained direction. Momentum. Coordination. I nodded once. Finally. Truth. Claire swallowed hard. I felt trapped. Inside a 6-bedroom house in Lincoln Park with joint investments, retirement accounts, and full access to every financial resource you wanted? She flinched slightly at that. Good. People rewrite history during betrayal. They transform comfort into oppression so guilt feels survivable. Claire looked exhausted now. Mascara slightly smudged beneath one eye. Shoulders slumped. Voice thinner. You stopped seeing me months ago, she whispered. I spent months trying to stabilize us while you built an exit strategy. She opened her mouth quickly after that. I never wanted to hurt you. Every cheating spouse says some version of that eventually. Pain without accountability. Damage framed as unfortunate. Collateral instead of deliberate action. I stood and walked toward the hallway cabinet beside the office door. Inside sat a small fireproof lockbox Michael told me to keep secured after the first consultation. Claire watched carefully as I entered the combination and removed a sealed envelope. "What is that?" she asked immediately. The reason I stayed calm tonight. I returned to the desk and placed the envelope directly between us. Reeves and Porter legal seal stamped across the front. Claire stared at it for a long second before looking back at me. "Ethan," she said carefully, "what exactly did your lawyer tell you?" I held her gaze steadily. "He told me Daniel Brooks filed for bankruptcy 11 months ago." Claire blinked twice after I mentioned the bankruptcy filing, and for the first time all night, I saw genuine confusion cut through the fear. Real confusion. Unscripted. "That makes no sense," she whispered. "Daniel owns property in Scottsdale." I slid the sealed envelope across the desk toward her. Owned property. She opened it carefully with trembling fingers and pulled out a stack of certified court records. Chapter 7 Filing. Debt restructuring schedules. Asset liquidation disclosures. 2 civil judgments tied to failed commercial investments in Arizona. Daniel Brooks looked wealthy because men like Daniel survive through presentation. Tailored suits. Luxury leases. Expense account dinners. Polished confidence funded by borrowed money. Claire scanned the pages silently while the illusion collapsed line by line in front of her. "He told me the bankruptcy came from an old business partner," she said quietly. Daniel told several women several versions of that story. Her head lifted instantly. "Several women?" I nodded once and opened another section of the binder. 3 printed screenshots sat clipped together beneath a divider labeled prior contacts. Different names. Different dates. Similar financial transfers. Similar timelines. Michael's private investigator uncovered them after tracing Daniel's previous addresses and litigation history. Once somebody manipulates money inside a relationship, patterns usually exist somewhere else too. Claire stared at the screenshots like they physically hurt to read. "This is insane," she muttered. "No," I said calmly. "This is documented." One message from a woman in Denver described Daniel convincing her to co-sign a condo lease before disappearing 2 months later. Another showed wire transfers tied to temporary investment opportunities. Same wording Daniel used with Claire according to recovered message fragments. Same emotional pacing too. Build intimacy. Create urgency. Introduce financial dependency. Transition toward future planning. Claire lowered the papers slowly and looked physically smaller sitting in that chair. "He said he loved me." The sentence came out weak and fragile, almost embarrassing to her own ears. I leaned back and studied her quietly for several seconds. "Maybe he believed that in moments," I said. "People still exploit things they enjoy." She pressed both palms against her eyes and breathed shakily. A year ago, hearing her cry would have wrecked me emotionally. Tonight, I analyzed the sound the same way I analyzed spreadsheets. Cause. Effect. Exposure. Damage control. "How much money?" I asked evenly. Claire froze instantly. Another dangerous question. Another shift from emotion toward accountability. "What?" "Total amount transferred to him." "Ethan." "Total amount." She stared down at the desk for several seconds before answering. 42,000. Lower than I expected. Better for court. Better for asset recovery. Worse for her credibility because that amount represented deliberate coordination instead of impulsive spending. I opened my laptop and typed several notes into a legal memo draft Michael requested before filing formal disclosure motions. Claire watched the screen carefully now. Every keystroke sounded final inside her head. "You are documenting this?" she asked softly. "I document everything now. You already decided who I am." I looked up from the screen. "You opened a hidden account 11 weeks after our honeymoon." Her eyes watered again. "I felt invisible with you." Invisible people rarely gain access to retirement accounts and shared investment portfolios. Harsh line. True line. Claire stood slowly and walked toward the office bookshelf where framed photos from our first year together still sat untouched. Napa Valley. Christmas downtown. Our engagement dinner. She picked up the Napa photo carefully and stared at it for a long moment. "At some point," she whispered, I started feeling like your employee instead of your wife. I almost answered emotionally then. Almost. Because part of me understood exactly when the distance started. Long hours. Contract deadlines. Endless infrastructure bids. I spent months securing our future while Daniel sold her fantasy in expensive restaurants and hotel suites. But sympathy changes nothing once deception becomes financial. Claire placed the picture frame back carefully and turned toward me again. So what happens now? She asked quietly. I closed the laptop slowly. That depends on whether Daniel knows you changed the beneficiary policy again yesterday morning. Her face lost all remaining color. Perfect. Because until that second, Claire still believed I had uncovered everything except her final move. Claire looked at me like she suddenly realized the room contained a version of her husband she had never actually met before. You accessed the policy today? She asked carefully. I shook my head once. Yesterday morning. 8:23. You logged into the account from your office network. Her lips parted slightly. How would you even know that? Because once somebody starts restructuring finances around an affair, every digital footprint matters. I opened another file on my laptop and rotated the screen toward her. Login records. IP verification logs. Timestamp confirmation from the insurance portal. Claire stared at the screen silently while her breathing turned shallow again. You removed Daniel as beneficiary, I said evenly. Then reassigned the percentage back to me. She lowered herself into the chair slowly like her legs suddenly lost strength. I was trying to fix this, she whispered. After 6 months. After I realized Daniel lied to me. There it was. Finally. Real panic replacing romantic fantasy. Affairs survive through selective blindness. People ignore obvious warnings because emotional escape feels addictive. Then reality enters through paperwork. Bankruptcy filings. Debt collection notices. Civil judgments. Structured manipulation patterns. Daniel stopped looking exciting the moment his financial history surfaced. Claire rubbed her temples hard and closed her eyes. I thought he was trapped financially because of bad investments, she said quietly. Predators always sound misunderstood. She flinched at that word. Good. Because predators rarely arrive wearing monster masks. They arrive polished. Charming. Strategic. I spent weeks studying Daniel's financial timeline after Michael's investigator uncovered the bankruptcy filing. The deeper we dug, the uglier the structure became. Daniel rotated apartments every 18 months. He maintained luxury appearances through revolving credit lines and short-term leases tied to shell consulting contracts. 3 former relationships ended immediately after large financial transfers. One woman paid $18,000 toward a failed startup Daniel claimed would recover within months. Another co-signed a Porsche lease he abandoned 8 weeks later. Same pattern every time. Emotional acceleration followed by financial dependency. Claire sat motionless while I explained it because every sentence forced her to confront something worse than betrayal. Humiliation. Nobody wants to admit they destroyed their marriage for someone running emotional fraud campaigns across 3 states. Did he ever ask you to open business accounts? I asked. Claire hesitated too long before answering. Yes. How many? 2. I nodded slowly. Expected. Did you sign anything? Just preliminary paperwork. Bring me copies tomorrow. She looked up sharply. Tomorrow. My attorney files formal separation motions Friday morning. Asset protection measures begin tonight. Her eyes widened immediately. You already froze accounts? Joint discretionary transfers over $5,000 now require dual authorization. Claire stared at me with something close to disbelief. You planned every step. You planned your exit first. Silence again. Heavy. Brutal. Claire finally stood and walked toward the kitchen. I followed several seconds later and found her leaning against the counter near our wedding photo wall. 12 framed moments from our first year together lined the hallway. Weekend trips. Holiday dinners. Smiling faces. Looking at those photos now felt like reviewing surveillance footage from a company already collapsing internally. At some point, Claire said quietly, I convinced myself you stopped loving me. I folded my arms slowly. So you transferred $42,000 to another man? Tears finally rolled down her face then. Quiet tears. Exhausted tears. I kept waiting for you to notice me again. That sentence almost reached me emotionally. Almost. Then my phone vibrated inside my pocket. Unknown number again. Same sender as before. I pulled out the phone slowly and looked down at the new message. One image attachment. Daniel Brooks sitting inside a downtown restaurant booth across from another woman. Timestamped 37 minutes earlier. Beneath the photo sat a single line of text. Your wife was never the only one. I stared at the photo for several seconds before turning the screen toward Claire. The reaction hit instantly. Confusion first, then humiliation, then the slow collapse that comes when somebody realizes they destroyed their own life for a fantasy already recycling itself somewhere else. Claire grabbed the phone from my hand and zoomed in on the image aggressively, like resolution itself might save her pride. Daniel sat across from a blonde woman wearing the same charcoal suit from last week's client dinner. Same silver watch. Same polished smile. Different target. Who sent this? Claire asked sharply. Unknown number. How long has somebody been following him? Long enough. Her breathing quickened again. Emotional betrayal inside an affair creates a special kind of panic because the betrayed person suddenly experiences both sides at once. Claire finally understood what she turned me into months ago. Suspicious, obsessive, hyper-aware, desperate for certainty. She lowered the phone slowly onto the kitchen counter and shook her head once. This has to be recent. 37 minutes ago. No, she muttered quickly. I mean the woman. Maybe she is. A co-worker. I almost admired how the human brain fights humiliation through denial even after evidence crushes every available escape route. Claire sounded exactly like I sounded 3 months earlier when I first found the River North Hotel charges. Your mind bargains for smaller pain before accepting catastrophic truth. You defended him faster than you defended our marriage tonight, I said quietly. That landed hard. Claire looked away immediately. Silence filled the kitchen again, but this silence felt different now. Less strategic. More exhausted. The affair had finally lost its glamour. Daniel stopped being an emotional escape and became what he actually was. A financially unstable man running the same emotional script across multiple women. Claire leaned against the counter and covered her mouth with one hand. I ruined everything, she whispered. I folded my arms slowly. You dismantled trust one transaction at a time. Tears rolled down her face again, but now embarrassment mixed into the grief. I thought he understood me. He studied you. Another painful truth. Real predators learn emotional gaps quickly. Daniel targeted validation because Claire craved admiration more than stability. Meanwhile, I spent months buried inside infrastructure bids, engineering reports, and 12-hour workdays trying to build long-term security for both of us. One man built foundations. The other sold adrenaline. Adrenaline usually wins short-term. Foundations survive audits. Claire slid into one of the kitchen chairs and stared blankly at the hardwood floor. What happens if this goes public? She asked softly. There it was again. Reputation. Social damage. Corporate fallout. Affairs remain private until legal exposure enters the equation. Michael already warned me that financial concealment tied to marital assets could trigger aggressive discovery motions if contested. That depends on whether your attorney cooperates, I said. Claire looked up sharply. Attorney? You met with one 2 months ago. Genuine shock crossed her face. How do you know that? Your phone connected automatically to the parking garage network beneath Halpern and Weiss Family Law on March 14th at 9:11 in the morning. She stared at me silently. Every hidden move she made now existed somewhere inside my records. Every secret meeting, every transfer, every deleted message fragment, every timeline inconsistency. I watched realization settle over her slowly. She no longer controlled the narrative at all. You turned our marriage into an investigation, she whispered. You turned it into a risk assessment first. Harsh. Accurate. Claire wiped her face carefully and stood again. I never slept with him after the beneficiary change, she said suddenly. Strange sentence. Specific sentence. I narrowed my eyes slightly. Why phrase it that way? Her lips parted slightly as if she regretted speaking too quickly. Then her phone vibrated on the kitchen island between us. One incoming text. Daniel Brooks. Claire froze instantly. So did I? The preview appeared across the lock screen in plain white letters. We need to talk before your husband finds out about Miami. The kitchen went completely silent after the word Miami appeared on Claire's screen. She grabbed the phone instantly, but speed changes nothing once truth enters the room. I watched her face carefully while she opened the message thread with trembling fingers. Fear replaced embarrassment now. Pure fear. Ethan, she whispered weakly. I can explain this. I leaned against the counter and folded my arms slowly. Then explain it. Claire stared down at the phone for several seconds before speaking. Daniel wanted me to move money through a property investment in Miami. How much money? 200,000. The number landed harder than everything else combined. Not because of the amount. Because of intent. Hotel rooms destroy trust. Financial conspiracy destroys identity. I stayed calm externally, but something inside me finally detached completely from the marriage standing in front of me. Claire looked up quickly after seeing my expression change. I never sent it, she said fast. I stopped after I learned about the bankruptcy. You still planned it. Tears rolled down her face again. I thought we were building a future together, while using my income and our joint assets as leverage. Her shoulders collapsed after that. No defense left. No performance left. Just consequences finally arriving all at once. I walked back into the office and opened the binder one last time. Inside sat the final draft of the separation agreement Michael prepared earlier that afternoon. Asset division, financial disclosures, temporary occupancy terms. Every page carried clean legal language designed to untangle a marriage that spent months rotting underneath polished appearances. Claire followed me slowly into the office. Please do not file this tomorrow, she whispered. I ended things with him. I looked at her steadily across the desk. You ended things after discovering he manipulated you financially. I still love you. Strange sentence. Dangerous sentence. Because part of me believed she meant it. Human beings can betray people they genuinely love. That truth hurts worse than hatred ever could. Hate creates clean endings. Love mixed with selfishness creates destruction without logic. Claire stepped closer to the desk, voice shaking now. I know I destroyed your trust. I know I became somebody ugly. But this marriage still matters to me. I sat down slowly and removed my wedding ring for the first time since our ceremony downtown 1 year earlier. The gold band felt heavier in my hand than it ever had on my finger. Marriage stops being sacred when secrecy becomes infrastructure, I said quietly. Claire closed her eyes as if the sentence physically wounded her. Maybe it did. I placed the ring carefully on top of the separation documents beside my laptop. Then I opened one final email from Michael Reeves sent 42 minutes earlier. Subject line, urgent review request. Attached beneath it sat a PDF labeled Brooks Holdings LLC. I opened the file and scanned the first page silently while Claire waited across from me. Then I looked up slowly. Daniel registered a shell company in Florida 6 weeks ago, I said. Claire stared at me blankly. Why does that matter? I rotated the laptop screen toward her. Company officers appeared listed beneath the registration details. Daniel Brooks. A second unidentified investor. Then the third name. Claire. Walker. Her face drained white instantly. I never signed this, she whispered. I studied the digital signature line carefully for several seconds before answering. Somebody signed it using your information. Claire looked terrified now. Truly terrified. Bigger than shame. Bigger than exposure. The kind of fear people feel when they realize betrayal opened a door they never understood. I closed the laptop slowly and stood from the desk. Tomorrow morning, I said quietly. You are coming with me to meet my attorney. Then I looked at the wedding photos sitting beside the office bookshelf one final time and finally understood something that took me an entire year to learn. Trust never dies in one dramatic moment. It dies quietly through tiny permissions people give themselves when they stop protecting the person who loves them most.